Hello, grade 10 students. We will continue with Writing a Story Section 2. Please prepare your student's book, page 29, workbook pages 23 to 25. Today's objectives: 1. Identify key information in a prompt by answering a set of questions. 2. Organize and streamline ideas by completing a plan. 3. Compose a short story after brainstorming ideas. So, do you still remember what did we do in our last session? Well done! We analyzed a story, we learned some writing basics, and we differentiated between weak and strong adjectives. Perfect! One more thing. I would like you to please put the following in their correct boxes. Yes, this is the beginning. Going up to our rising action. Climax, the highest point. Coming down with the falling action. End. Activity 1, Student's Book, page 29, Exercise E. Read the writing task and underline the keywords. Well done! Go the distance. Our magazine is looking for new short stories about adventure and survival. Your story must include a tent or a car. Perfect! Now, I want you to please answer these questions. Perfect! Question 1. Why are you writing this story? Definitely, I'm writing the story to entertain the readers. 2. Who will read it? The readers of the magazine will read the story. What should the story be about? The story should be about adventure and survival. Grade 10 students, what do we do before we write? Before we write, we always plan our ideas. Now, you will pause the video. Fill in the plan workbook, page 23. By answering the questions in your student's book, page 29, exercise F. Come back for a feedback. We will start with the introduction. Remember, my dear students, I will share with you my own ideas, and I advise you to write your own ideas first and then come back for this feedback. Okay, as we said, we will start with the introduction. Who is the main character in the story? Well, the main characters in my story are two best friends, Arthur and Dan. Now the setting. Where is the story set? My story is set in the forest. When is the story set? Or when did the story happen? After several hours of hiking. Your story can have different characters and a different setting. Remember, you should describe the place or the weather in the introduction of your story. It simply gives your story life. We will move on to the rising action, where we have to answer these two questions. What is the main character doing? Is anyone with him or her? Remember, in my story, I have two main characters, Dan and Arthur. Let's see what they did. They put up their tent. Then, they went to sleep. Suddenly, Dan woke Arthur up just before the climax. What's the climax? What's the main event or highest point of tension in the story? A noise filled the tent. What do the characters do or say or think or feel? Well, They tore open the entrance to the tent and they felt extremely terrified. How is the event resolved? They left the tent before the water wave smashed it. Lucky them. Falling action. How do the characters respond to what happened? What do they do to try to get everything back to normal? After a wave crashed the tent, they stood by the side. Here we are in our ending. What happens in the end? How do the characters feel afterwards? Remember, this is our conclusion. They felt shocked, of course. And a driver rescued them and took them home. Lucky Dan and Arthur. Before you write, it is very important to understand and keep these tips in mind. That's why I would like you to open your student's book, page 29, exercise G. Read the tip box very carefully and highlight or underline important key points. Come back for feedback. This is extremely important. Let's start. When writing a story, 1. Use past tenses. Remember, you can use past simple, past perfect, past progressive, and so on. But mainly, we use the past progressive when setting the scene, especially in the introduction where we describe the place or the weather. 2. Keep the plot simple. Remember, my lovely students, simplicity is beauty. And divide your story into one paragraph for each stage. That's why you should be neat. And don't forget to leave spaces between paragraphs. It will allow your reader to follow on with your story. Now, how to make your story more interesting? If you notice, point 1 and point 2 are basics which we should use in each and every story. However, in order to add spices to our story and make it more interesting, just like tasty dishes, we need to add these points. 1. Add direct speech, which is the dialogue between characters. Remember, you can use verbs such as whispered, asked, commanded. Questions and exclamations. They simply bring your story to life and they kill boredom. Moreover, you have to use a variety of adverbs and weak or strong adjectives. This simply allows your readers to visualize your story. Use suitable linkers such as firstly, secondly, moreover, and so on to indicate sequence of events. It also organizes your story and helps you form your chronological or time order. Last point. Don't forget to use figurative language such as idioms, expressions, metaphors. We even have similes. Let's take a look at these examples. Froze in shock or fear. This is an example of this is an example of a metaphor. Over here, we are trying to show how much someone is afraid by comparing him to a freezing object such as ice. To say he froze in shock or fear, he cannot move anymore. Nearly jumped out of his or her skin. This is an example of definitely, this is an idiom, and it simply shows that someone is really afraid. The last one, couldn't believe his or her eyes or ears. This is an example of what? Perfect. This is an example of expression to show disbelief or shock. My dear students, remember, using these tips is very important to add life to your story, to make it more interesting, to attract your readers. Why do we write stories? Yes, we write stories to entertain readers. Add more spices to entertain your readers more. It's time to write your story, my dear students. You will write your story in your workbook, page 24. But how will you write your story? Yes, you will change the points or answers you have filled in the plan to well-organized paragraphs. You will use your answers to make your own story. My dear students, now we will see how we will change the main points or suggested answers from the plan to a well-organized introduction paragraph. All what you have to do is elaborate your points, add some details, and simply you will get an amazing paragraph. Let's take a closer look. We have the place, the time, the main characters, but we are going to add a very important detail which I told you about before. We are going to add a description of the place. You can also add a description of the weather. Example, a long line of dry ground, sheltered by trees on both sides. So don't forget to describe your scene in the introduction. Grade 10 students, this is the main part of the story where we have the rising action, climax, and falling action. Let's take a closer look together. This is where things start boiling before the climax. It's our rising action. And here are its details. Then, moving on to our boiling or highest point of tension. Our interesting climax, and these are its events. Amazing. Things start getting back to normal with the falling action, and these are its events. I have a question for you. How did we change our points or answers into paragraphs? Definitely! We expanded our answers by adding details such as direct speech, which is the dialogue between the characters. Also, figurative language, such as this simile. It sounded like a train approaching fast. We can also use adverbs and adjectives, and this is an example of an adjective. Higher ground. Excellent. Is that all? No. When we write a story, we need to follow a chronological or time order. One last question for you. What else did we do in this story? Yes! We divided our story into paragraphs, and as you can see, we have spaces between these paragraphs. Everything has an end, and our story has an end too. This is our conclusion in which we changed into a paragraph where it has the feelings and the solution. Dear students, don't forget to add interesting details in your conclusion. Here we have the whole story, introduction, main part, and conclusion. Remember, this is just a suggested story for you. I'm sure you have written amazing stories. This is our final step. What do we do after writing? Yes! Amazing answer! We check. Open your workbook, page 25, where you have this checklist, and I would like you to please check if you have added all the details needed. Extra feedback will be given by your teacher.